Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us on a Saturday. Beto, would you like to give some words before we start?
I just wanna welcome everybody back on day 3. Hopefully you've been with us from the very beginning, and so you've learned so far that you not only are you able to apply for these programs, but you deserve to apply for different programs and different opportunities. Then you got to meet some folks with some fantastic programs and opportunities and scholarships and such. So hopefully you got connected now. Thank you to Doctora Olivia Molinar. She's going to be walking us through the personal statement process. So thank you all very much for joining us on day 3. Hopefully you're going to have a ton of questions. I know some of you have already listed questions when you registered. We have shared those with Doctora Molinar Ingles, and we'll hopefully be able to address those. So stand by, be your genuine selves. Whatever questions you may have, please drop them in the chat, and we are going to do our best to make sure that by the end of the day today, you are informed of the different components in a personal statement. We address some of the questions that you may have, and that we also connect you with somebody who can continue to support you even after this workshop. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Doctora, for joining us today, and we look forward to learning more and developing your personal statements and seeing you apply for our programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Beto. Again, most of you or many of you have already seen me on day 1. I did give you already a few pointers on developing a personal statement or a statement of purpose. And today I'm going to walk you through kind of generally what the application process looks like. And I'm going to use one example, since a lot of you may be from City College, and if you're in biomedical sciences and interested in an experience in the summer for research experience, we're going to go through that specific example as well. And I first wanted to start off by, I did invite several scientists, and I already see them online. I wanted our scientists to be part of our breakout room. So you guys are going to go into breakout rooms for 2 different activities, and they're going to help guide those activities. And so I see 3 of them right now. And so if Dr. Pina Nunez, Dr. Birch, and Metz, if you guys can please go ahead and introduce yourselves, who you are, where you're at, what are you doing, and a word that describes yourself, something that you think that you might want, like a word that you would put in a personal statement about yourself, just one word. Dr. Pina Nunez?
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah, hi, so my name is Francisco Pina, yeah, and I am a project scientist here at UCSD. So I did my undergrad at the University of Arizona, and then I did my PhD at Stanford University. And I've been at UCSD since I completed my PhD. Let's see, I'm a cellular molecular biologist. I work on the endoplasmic reticulum and how this organelle is inherited from one generation to the next in cells, and also how proteins production is maintained in the cells. I guess one word that I would use to describe myself would be a very caring person. So I care about what I am doing and what others are doing and helping others.
Great, thank you so much. Dr. Birch?
Hello, everybody. My name is Sierra Birch. I'm a postdoc, doctoral fellow when I work with Olivia. And I went to undergrad in the northwestern tip of PA, Edinburgh University, where I studied biochemistry. And then I got my PhD in Oregon, where I studied how bacteria manipulate their DNA to protect themselves from the host immune response. And now what I'm doing at UCSD is I, with Olivia, study this special class of cells that line the blood vessels. And I study how proteins communicate with each other in order to keep those cells happy so that our cardiovascular system and then our immune system is happy. And I suppose a word I could describe myself is, I guess I would say creative. A lot of people don't associate that with scientists, but that's actually a very, very important, well, it can be a useful attribute, how you think about things and how you go about approaching these questions. Sometimes you have to think outside the box and get creative. And I think that's really helped me progress as a scientist. So that's something that I try to convey to any particular fellowship or goal that I'm trying to ascertain. So thank you for having me today.
Hola everyone, my name is Ms. Lizzy Cisneros. I would still consider myself a mentee of Dr. Olivia Molinar Ingles. She was my postdoc mentor at UCSD, and I graduated, I guess now 2 years ago or a year ago from UCSD as a human biology major. I'm currently at City of Hope in a PhD program for biology, and I just started my second year. I'm currently in a lab where I study the mechanisms of DNA double-strand break repair. So this is really important for understanding how how cancer can form. Like, it's one of the hallmarks of cancer, as well as understanding how to treat cancer, because it's forming these DNA double-strand breaks is a form of treating cancers, for example, like using radiotherapy. So we can understand sort of like the mechanisms involved in this. We can understand how to better sort of treat and target cancers for like DNA double-strand breaks. So yeah, really happy to be here.
Thank you, scientists. So anytime you go into a breakout room, this is who you're going to be talking with. So in our first breakout room, this is really an icebreaker for all of us to start to get to know each other. And so we're going to go into breakout rooms, and you're briefly going to introduce yourself. And so once you're in your breakout room, you're going to say your name, where you are from, your current institution, one word that describes yourself, and the scientists have already illustrated it. So that's what you would be doing. And you would say why you chose your word. And we're going to assign not the scientists themselves, but we're going to assign a student recorder to report back the words when we come back from the breakout rooms. And you're going to have about 10 minutes to do this. Anyway, I was asking for Paco's group, whoever was a student reporter, if you guys can report back the words that you guys talked about in your group.
Yeah, my name is Aaliyah, and the words that we came up in Francisco's group is dedicated, determined, caring, and curious.
Great, thank you so much.
Hi, I want to talk on behalf of Metz's group. In our group, we had Scott, Ying, Archie, Santiago, Jonathan, Rosales, and Ronnie. And some of the words that came across were perfectionist, resilience, perseverance, energetic, but in Spanish, inquieto, adaptable, and persistent, and lastly, motivated.
Great, thank you so much, Archie. And lastly, Sierra's group.
Hi, my name is Joseph, and the words that our group came up with were tenacious, honest, intrinsic, humility, and generous.
Awesome. Those are actually all great words. And the reason why I wanted to start this off is I want you guys to start thinking about words that describe yourself, words that are strong, words that you can do to insert into your personal statement. So tenacious is a really great one. Honest. You want to be really honest about who you really are. You don't want to talk about someone, that is not you. You want to be who you are. And with that all comes humility. There's also, if you're going to go into science, curiosity, you need to be curious. You want to be curious. One that really caught my attention, which we don't really think about, but STEM is another area where you can use a lot of things such as, like, for example, art, writing, and therefore you need to be creative. you need to learn how to use those skills into your personal statement, put them in there so that they can say who this person is and why are you the most competitive person to be able to go ahead and be admitted to the program or be given the money for a scholarship or even, you know, admitted to college or graduate school and whatnot. So my word, and I know I was cut off for Sarah's group. I was going to tell you guys my word, and then I went directly into another breakout room. So the word that I chose was driven. And the reason why that I chose that is because throughout all my life, I've decided that I wanted to do something. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm qualified to tell you about how to write a personal statement, because I've already been in your shoes. And so it's going to be, you know, a couple minutes of just who I am. So I am Dr. Olivia Molinar Inglis, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of my career path. I do have my email. It's omolinaringlis@gmail. I'm sorry, at ucsd.edu. I don't know why I keep saying at gmail.com. And let me change that real quick so that you guys don't get confused. At the end of this workshop, we are going to ask you that you guys can actually share your personal statements with us, and the email that you will be sharing them with is mine. So please go ahead and write that down so that we can go ahead and start looking at these personal statements. We're in the process of creating a personal statement development group. So I will be the first one that takes a look at these statements, and then I'll pass on to one of my colleagues, whether it be anybody who's currently on the call or other future potential editors. And so a little bit about myself. I really didn't know what I was going to be when I was, you know, young until I met Governor Ann Richards. So I come from El Paso, Texas, and I was inspired to pursue an education by Governor Ann Richards. And from then on, I thought I was going to become a lawyer and eventually the president of the United States. Well, clearly, I somehow changed my career path in high school and decided to pursue STEM. So I went to Americas High School in El Paso, Texas, and one of the careers that they always sold to me as a high school student was, you know, the best, you know, career that you can get into is you can become an MD, right? And so that was kind of my goal from then on. I joined the hospital thinking, you know, that's what I was going to do. But that experience solidified the fact that I did not want to go to medical school. So instead, I went into research. So I started at the University of Texas at El Paso, where I got a bachelor's in microbiology. And I was part of a lot of programs where I had to write many different personal statements. And from there, I graduated. I went to Carnegie Mellon University to get a PhD in developmental and cellular biology and genetics. And now I'm currently at the University of California, San Diego as a UCSD postdoctoral fellow. And next, I believe that I'm going to transition and starting to apply to faculty positions. If not, you'll find me hopefully in an industry position in the future. But like many of you as an undergraduate, you have to look for opportunities that give you that experience. And so, for example, for me, I was part of a summer program called Research Experiences for Undergraduates at Carnegie Mellon University. So that took me from El Paso, Texas, all the way to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then when I came back, I decided that I really like to do research. So I started at the University of Texas at El Paso with Dr. Renato Aguilera, understanding how a DNA scissors works to activate the immune system. And that was a new protein that we had found in the lab. And so my goal was to characterize it. In the process, I decided that I needed a little bit more experience and that I wanted to explore a different area. So I'm a biologist, but I did a research experience for undergraduates in Spain. And so in Spain, I looked at chemistry. And what we did there is we took natural products or secondary metabolites from sponges, and we were able to characterize them. And a lot of these secondary metabolites are used as drug treatments. So once you have the compound's name, then you can try to see what it does in different biological processes. So when I came back to the University of Texas after that summer program, I applied to 2 scholarships. And so the Research Initiative for Scientific Enhancement, as well as the Minority Access to Research Careers, MARC. And so you can find all these different scholarship programs throughout, 2-year as well as 4-year programs. And I'm going to tell you about a summer program that is specifically for City College. And you can also find other summer programs for other 2-year institutions, which they're already starting to focus on more. And kind of the application process for scholarships or research programs is, and I told you this before in the previous workshop, is you start your application process the day you start your college career. So when you start college, you need to start thinking about things that you need to start doing to make you a competitive student to apply for scholarships as well as research programs. You search for scholarships, so you can do this through, Googling. Most universities have their own programs, so you can go through, universities and see what kind of programs they offer in the summer. You can ask your advisors. You can email people who are in science, and most of us will be happy to direct you to scholarships, internship, or experiences that you can have. And remember, sometimes looking for these opportunities, sometimes we always think of the monetary retribution, right? Oh, we're going to get paid for this, or we're going to do this. But sometimes it can be as simple as gaining experience as a volunteer. And so those are things that we always have to keep in mind. So you prepare your applications ahead of time, and you can do that by Googling, searching, and I already told you this, but informal interviews, so talking to people about these experiences, people who've actually been through programs or other people, are some of the most important ways that you can learn about this. And this is really important, and I'm going to emphasize this because when you write your personal statement, you want to have your generic personal statement, but then you also want to have a couple of sentences that you know the institution, that you know the research programs that they have, that you know a little bit about that institution, because universities want to know that you've done your homework and that you've learned, a little bit about their programs. So you need to get your materials prepared ahead of time. So depending on the program, it could be from 1 to 3 letters. For the most part, I've seen 2 to 3 letters of recommendations that they ask for. And these, again, how do you get letters of recommendation? Make sure that you get to know your professors. Make sure that people who you volunteer with can talk about the kind of person that you are. And make sure that when you ask for letters of recommendation, you ask for people who can write strong letters of recommendation. And when you do ask for them, make sure that you give them enough time. So maybe about a month would be really good time to give them, for them to write a letter of rec. Make sure that you give them a personal statement of some sort, or a little paragraph that describes you, of things that you want them to talk about. Make sure that you also give them a resume or your curriculum vitae, which talks about everything that you've been doing, volunteering, your schoolwork, classes that you've taken, research that you've done, etc. Then you also have to give them your transcripts. Some places allow you to submit unofficial. Some places expect you to submit official. So just keep that in mind in the time frame when you're making plans to apply to scholarships, research experiences, graduate school, med school even. Make sure that you have that in mind. Sometimes getting a transcript sent out directly from the university takes a long time because you need to get it sealed, etc. Then there's the application. And sometimes the applications can take from 30 minutes, or they can take, days and days to put together. And within that application is other things that you need to submit. So sometimes they ask you for your resume or your CV. So make sure that you make one and keep it up to date so that it's easy for you to send it out whenever you need to. If you also need help with editing or putting a resume together, please go ahead and email me. I will give you an example that I have and help you create your own. And then the last part, which is one of the most important parts of your applications, is your personal statement. This is where you're going to talk about who you are and what you're going to gain through the project, and project, research, scholarship, whatever you're applying to, and what you are going to contribute as well. So it's always a give and take, right? You're going to be applying to the scholarship, but what are you going to do with the scholarship? You're going to be applying to this research program, but what are you going to gain through the research program? It's not just about what you're gaining, but it's about what you're giving. So if you're a team player, you're going to advance science. You're going to advance science as a team. So all those things you need to keep in mind and make sure that you're thinking about. And that's why these words, if you start making a list of words that describes you, is going to start helping you form an outline for that statement. And I'm just going to go back a little bit to my story, but one of the things that I always talk about, and I've started to go away from that, is a lot of my development of my personal statements is resilience and the hardships that I've been through as a first generation college student, as a Latina in science, and also coming from, for example, a place of low resources where we didn't have any water, and how we overcame those resources, and how I became excited to help my community through all these endeavors. And so it's transitioned, as you can imagine, from a very generic where I want to help my community to how I want to help my community through my science, through my outreach work, etc. So your development of your personal statement well developed through the years. And once you craft one personal statement, it's easy just to take that statement and craft it and change a couple of things for you to send it out to different opportunities. So keep that in mind. And so, for example, how do you keep track of these applications? And I asked one of my students, I won't say any names, but I asked one of my students to send me how they keep track of what they're doing. And so in terms of, and this was specific to graduate programs, but can be done for example, scholarships. It can be done for summer internships. It can be done for volunteer experiences. So how do you keep track of where you're applying to? And so, for example, what I tell people when they're applying to graduate programs or when they're applying to scholarships or as well as summer internships is, you don't just want to apply to one. So you're going to apply to one summer program and then you're competing with 20 other people and they're only accepting 5. So your chances of getting in are, quite slim, right? Especially if they're more competitive than you. So you want to be able to maximize your chances of actually getting an opportunity by, for example, and I tell students this all the time, think about 5 schools that you would want to go to. Like those are your dream schools. Those are schools that, you're going to have to aspire and work really hard to get there. Think about another 5 schools that you think you might get into, but it's still going to be hard for you to get into. And then think about another 5 schools that, you might probably get into based on the qualifications that they are asking for and where you are at. And so what does this mean? So like, and it doesn't have to be 5, 5, 5. It can be 2, 2, 2, and just decide, but have a difference of institution as well as type, as well as, thinking of where you want to go. So here, for example, these were some of probably the top choices: Caltech, Cornell, University of Chicago, University of California, Irvine, Washington University, and then of course, some of the lower tier universities that they were applying to, UTEP, et cetera, right? So thinking about Ivy schools all the way to schools that you're probably going to get into. And this can be for anything. So think about how you want to organize this. And then this person organized it by name, location. Do they require a specific test called the GRE required for graduate school? What kind of program it is, the PI, resources, when the applications are due. This is really important. How many letters of recommendation you need. Do you need the subject GRE? So not only do you need the general GRE, but then you need, for example, a very subject specific GRE. Do they require a statement of purpose? Do they require resume and your CV? And you can start, filling these in, making sure that you have this. When you're also sending the people that are going to be writing your letters of rec, you also want to have somewhat of a similar form, similar to this, to send out to them, so they also know when the deadlines are, where you're applying to, and you can always, edit. And someone asked before, how many recommendation letters, can a person write for you? Is there a limit? No, there isn't, but it's important for you to have something organized that you give the person who's writing your letters of rec, as well as your resume or your CV, your statement of purpose, so that they know exactly what they need to write and when they need to submit your letters. Make sure that you do this with ahead of time. 1 month is probably a good amount of time if you can do it with more time, but make sure that you're also reminding them, 2 weeks before the deadline, you haven't submitted, can you still submit? And if so, blah, 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 right? And emails, and always send thank you notes. And before it was written, now you can do it by email. Make sure that you always thank people for their time and everything that they're, that they're doing.
Olivia, can I chime in real quick?
Yes.
So yeah, in along those notes, I would also add that it's good to have various folks that would be willing to provide you letters of recommendation, because sometimes maybe that school you're applying to, maybe there's a faculty member who's an alum from that school, and so having somebody who writes you a letter that is an alum from that school could sometimes be helpful. So again, it goes back to how informed you are and how strategic you are about who you're asking to write you the letters of recommendation. But all that is only done when you give enough time.
Right. Thank you, Beto. Yeah, and it's very important to be strategic, right? You want to have someone who knows you well. A lot of schools, you know, if you're applying to a research position, they don't say this in your application, but you want to have someone that who can talk about what you would be like in a research environment. So it's probably going to have to be one of your faculty advisors, or so if you've been doing volunteer work somewhere else, you can always get someone to talk about specific things that will help you advance the research goals of certain labs. So make sure that you keep that in mind. You just don't want to ask anyone. You need to be strategic of who you're asking. Also, I told you I was going to tell you about an opportunity. If you're a City College student, this is just one example. You can find all sorts of different examples, and I kind of just wanted you to walk you through the process so you know what each summer experience looks like. So this is and I actually helped run this as an ERACTA fellow. So it's called the ERACTA Summer Undergraduate Research Program at UCSD. It's an 8-week research internship. You gain research and presentation experience. You received a $3,000 stipend. What does this mean? This means that you are getting paid to do research. Explore the beautiful UCSD while living in a dorm. So they'll sponsor a dorm for you so that you can live there for those 8 weeks, which is nice because if you're not living currently in a dorm, you will be able to experience this. You'll get to meet people more like yourself, interested in the things that you're doing. You're also going to grow your professional skills through workshops. So we give a workshop each week, and you'll get, in addition to research experience, we'll tell you about, you know, developing a personal statement. We'll tell you how to develop your presentation at the end of the program. And not just that, but you get to experience a lot of fun things. Like we go to the Padres game. I know right now it's a little bit hard because we're social distancing, but you know, we do get to explore the zoo, and we do a really awesome, very scary, if you ask my students, a ropes climbing course where you probably will, and will be one of the only times where you'll hear me yell. So if you want to hear me yell, this is an opportunity for you. And I'm going to switch out gears. Just kind of want to bring up the application, what that looks like on the internet. And so let me share my screen with what that looks like. So here is that opportunity that I'm talking about. So these are fellows like yourself that have already applied and been through the program. And so the ERACTA Serve program runs from June 20th through August 13th of 2021. And most of these summer internships, the deadlines run from probably December all the way to the early spring. So here, this one, the deadline is February 8th, 2021. And so here you can find everything that is required for you to do. So here's what you will do. And you also get other expenses covered. So for example, $250 to cover your travel expenses, $350 for meeting registrations if you end up going to a national conference, which are all important things that you can be doing. And so here's the application, how to apply. Here are the steps. What do you need to prepare? And this is what we're going to be talking about most through the remainder of what I'm going to be talking about. So the personal statement should describe your research interest and experience, your educational goals, including your plans to transfer to a four-year institution, and any activities or experiences that have prepared you to do so. For example, MESA, relevant workshops, previous training, or research experience, community service, or volunteer work, career objectives, and any hardships you may have faced. The personal statement should be uploaded as a Word document or PDF, and it's a 2-page limit. So all the schools that we're looking at are very, very, very specific, and you have to read the instructions really well for you to be able to, you know, target each specific thing that they're asking for. Okay. So we're going to go back to our presentation. I just wanted to show you what that kind of looked like if you actually went to the website. Okay, so now we have today's objectives. And in today's objectives, what we have are, you know, getting to know yourself. So we already started this with the introduction. So what are some of those words that, you know, really talk to yourself? You know, what are you doing? And are those making you competitive? What can you be doing if you're not as competitive as you think you are? And sometimes we have this notion of, oh, we're very competitive. But then when you start talking about the things that you've done, you still need to do a little bit more. So sometimes talking to this about an advisor, if you have an advisor, go do that. If not, find yourself mentors. You can find mentors everywhere. It doesn't have to be one single person. And I would suggest that you have mentors for specific things, right? So for example, I have mentors when I have to submit a personal statement. I actually send it to them for feedback. I have mentors when I need a problem solved, I go to them for that problem and I ask them what can be done. So make sure that you keep all these mentors so that they can guide you in terms of what you need. And we're going to learn what is a personal statement, what you should incorporate in your personal statement, what should you not incorporate in your personal statement, examples of good and bad examples of personal statements, which I don't think we're going to really have time to go through today, but try writing your own personal statement. And I'm going to give you an outline of things to consider and tips that you can do to start crafting your own. And so what is a personal statement? It is an essay that demonstrates your qualifications and your commitment to your chosen field. And this is why it was really important. So for example, last time I told everybody to make sure that they're reading the specific requirements for each, for example, scholarship or summer internship. And keep in mind when you ask these, when you have informal interviews, you also want to ask questions about what is expected from you, what would you be doing, just so that you know what your commitment to that chosen field would be. And one of the examples which I gave last time is if you're going to medical school, getting a summer research experience for undergraduates is really great for you. And the problem though is that a lot of these programs are geared towards trying to getting students to go into a research field. So if you're going to go and do, for example, medicine, that's kind of frowned upon in some universities in terms of if you are pre-med and you go do this research experience and then you leave that research experience, when that program is tracking exactly what you're trying to do and what their success rate was getting a student into research, you're going to be one of those students that, didn't go into research. So that's going to have their program not be as successful. So in terms of thinking about those things, I'm not telling you to lie, but when you're an undergraduate, you need to explore career options. So if you want to go to medical school, that's great, but you need to make sure that you understand that when you're applying to a research program, you're going to be doing research, which is not going to get you in terms of getting closer to med school. It's going to make you look more competitive, but it isn't necessarily going to pave a road for medical school. And it's also going to be harder for schools that are actually wanting people who go to research, getting them into research, going to lower their stats. So just think about those things when you're writing that personal statement. It should also be vibrant with details and examples and should scream to the readers, this is why you should take me. This is why you should give me the money. And so think about the language that you're using. What kind of strong language are you using to show that you are the person that they should choose? So, and that's where you need to know yourself and what you have done. What have you been doing now that makes you competitive? What are your strengths and weaknesses? What life challenges have you experienced? You have to have a running theme that you can work with. So is it giving back to your community? Is it maybe someone in your family had cancer? Or is it the curiosity that is leading you towards science? What have your classes taught you about being curious or creative, etc.? And so these are all things that you have to keep in mind. And when you're writing a personal statement, you want to write a story. You want to write, this is my story, and this is why you should choose me. So here's another activity that we're going to do, and this is on our own. So do you know yourself, who you are? So just take 2 to 3 minutes on your own. If you have a pen and paper, kind of write down things that make you unique and things about why they should choose, characteristics that would want a program or a foundation to choose you for them to give you money. So let's take about 2 to 3 minutes. And you're not going to be telling us out loud about these. So you can be as personal as you want, just so that you can start to get to know yourself. All right. Did you guys find this activity useful in terms of just trying to get to know yourself? And, are you competitive? What are you doing? Are there things that you could be doing, right? Just write things down sometimes, outlines. For me, writing an outline of something that I want to do or that I need to get done is really important. So all those things that, before writing a personal statement, I would always recommend that you write an outline and that you think about what a running theme would be. And don't, think about it too much. Sometimes if a theme doesn't come to mind, just write. write anything that comes to mind. It's always easier to come back and edit it, and sometimes to actually put it all together towards the end once you have the meat and that you've already packaged it in there. So I told you we were going to share out because this could be personal. And I know one of the questions that was sent out is, how personal do you get in a personal statement? And, you know, a lot of people will have different answers to that. But what I will say is keep it personal enough that you're telling them who you are about yourself. But make sure that when you're being personal, you're not being negative towards anything or anybody. So yes, maybe you've had a really tough life, but you want to say that in terms of, I had these things that happened to me, but I've turned it around and now that I'm doing this. But I will say this, I would highly recommend that you give it to people to read it before, you know, you continue to use this, because sometimes things can be very personal and you may yourself not think that it's very personal, but it may come off personal and it may come off off-putting to other people. So make sure that when you're writing this, keep that in mind. How personal do you want to get? That's really up to you. However, I would really recommend that you think about those things that you're going to put in there, because other people are going to read it. A selections committee is going to read it. Faculty members are going to read it. Other students are going to read this. So make sure that, you know, you think about what you're putting in there and making sure that you can, if it's really negative, that you either not put it or that you spin it in a very, very positive way, because people want to hear your positivity and what you're going to bring to the table. And if you have any issues or think about, you know, an experience that you want to talk about, and you're not sure if you want to put this in, then you can go ahead and email me and we can have a conversation about this. I just recently wrote a personal statement, and this was actually very personal, but very relevant. So for example, I wrote about my father passing away of COVID. And so I'm a scientist, and this is what makes me want to help the world. I want people like my father to have a better, you know, fighting chance when it comes to infections. So that was personal, but that was relevant towards the specific, you know, area that I want to do. I'm a scientist. I investigate sepsis. And for me, my dad passing away from sepsis is kind of something that made me feel like I couldn't do much about it, but I want to do it. So here I am. Here's my skill set. This is what I'm going to help with information, help with all these different opportunities that I can help as a scientist, right? So that was very, very personal, but also very, very important to what I want to do eventually. Here's another breakout session that we're going to do. And so remember the words that we used in the beginning to describe ourselves. So mine was driven. And so here's a statement that I'm thinking about putting in a personal statement. I am driven and want to help my community by becoming a scientist. Okay. So what I want you to do is you guys are going to get back into your breakout rooms, and I want you to discuss this statement. And I want you to discuss, is this already a good statement or can this be better? And then we'll come back in about 5 minutes. So for example, I gave you a different example, and I think from the group that I was at, I heard that the statement that I gave was very vague, and it's true. So the statement was very vague, and also what we need to do is when we write this stuff, we need to be as concise as possible, because sometimes you only have 2 pages. Sometimes you may have 500 words, right? So it depends on what the requirements are, then that's what you're going to be, you know, using. So instead of saying I am driven and want to help my community by becoming a scientist, how about I'm a passionate scientist driven to help my community through my current position as an undergraduate researcher and through my STEM community outreach. So here I've already written 1 sentence is telling you that I'm a passionate scientist, and you may not consider yourself a passionate scientist at this point because you may not have experience. But if you've worked in a lab, so if you've already taken some courses, if you've already been, you know, doing experiments, all of that counts as a scientist. So you need to start seeing yourself as a scientist. I am a scientist. So when you write your personal statement and you want to go into research, you want to use words that sound strong. I'm a scientist. I'm creative. And you also want to think about, and I can give you the resource, I don't have it here, but when we're writing a personal statement, there are a lot of biases against, you know, women in writing letters of rec, as well as when you write your personal statement. So I will encourage, the female students that are on right now, is don't call yourself, and this is, you can if you want, but when we start calling ourselves motherly, when we start calling ourselves and sectioning us into those specific, boxes that say, oh, you're a female researcher, that sometimes can be detrimental to how faculty and how other people see us. So we want to be very generic in terms of who we are. And you can see it here, I'm calling myself a scientist. When you can use, they, don't try to use words, like I said, motherly is one that you don't want to use. I did hear, which is really important. But for example, one of the other students in one of the breakout rooms said that, and I didn't catch the whole sentence, but it was about creative and exploring through their children. Is this correct, Aaliyah?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
That sounds about correct, right? So that's actually a really good one, because you didn't call yourself motherly, but you did say, I use, I, and you can elaborate on that, right? I have children, and therefore, we use all the scientific method and we practice it all the time, right? So those are things that you can incorporate in and you can and play around with. But you want to keep in mind, and I can give you that resource where it says, make sure that you try to make yourself more of a scientist, so use, the language of a scientist versus, motherly and all these kind of other words that, other people might not associate with the scientist. So who you are matters when you're writing your personal statement. Show off who you are in your personal statement. Be humble while doing so. People don't like to work with arrogant people. So make sure that when you're using the language, that you're very careful on how you're crafting something so that you look like, this is what I've done versus, oh, this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do in the program, guys, versus, I'm sure that's probably not what it's going to sound like to people, but make sure that it doesn't come off that way. What you think sets you apart from others, that's really important. Think about how you can use examples to make more compelling statements. I already gave you that one example. So that example was vague. You want to use examples of what you've been doing to make those statements stronger. You may not have a lot of work experience, but you have other experiences. You play an instrument or sport competitively. Those are all really important things to bring up. As a person who plays an instrument, you're dedicated. You work hard hours, putting in the work into learning how to play that, etc. As a sport, playing a sport, you're a team player, you're dedicated, etc. So those are all things that you can, bring up. As a scientist, I will be a team player, which is, highlighted in my 10 years of playing instrument B. Or, for example, you can say, I've been competitively playing football and, I'm a team player, that is really dedicated, et cetera, right? So you can work around with all those different things that you've already done that make you look and sound more competitive. You've been in college a couple of years, so try to stick to your current examples. What does this mean? So you guys have already graduated, maybe it's been 2 years from high school, and yes, the things that you did in high school, you can still use them a little bit, but like I said, since you started college up until now, you needed to have made new memories, you needed to have made new commitments so that you're not always talking about high school, because then that can be seen as, something bad by people. Okay, so you've already been here for 2 years, but what have you done here? You've already used that to apply to college, but we want to know now, what have you been doing? What's your commitment now? What does that look like? So think about those things. Don't try to use the things that you've already used in high school. And when you're thinking about things to do, so if you think you're not very competitive and there's still things that you need to do, start doing slowly, like, volunteering. There's a lot of student orgs on campus that you can go to, but remember, don't spread yourself too thin. So what is a personal statement? Typically, a personal statement is no longer than 2 pages, or there is a word limit. Check the application requirements. Margins should not be shorter than 1 inch. And I would highly recommend to use 11 to 12 font and stick to legible fonts. I highly recommend using Times. Some personal statements tell you to leave out your name and they tell you just to write the title. So make sure that you look at those requirements. Some applications will allow you to submit additional documents. So this isn't talking about, for example, what does your GPA look like? Is it a 4.0 out of 4.0? Then you don't need to discuss this. But what if you have a 2.0 out of 4.0? That is something that you may have to discuss. And I would highly recommend that you email these programs and ask whether you can write a separate paper called an addendum, where you would talk about, I received a 2.0 until now because, and make sure that they're not weak, something like, that shows your lack of commitment, but something that can say something like, I've been working 2 other jobs and therefore it's been hard to keep, everything in place and juggle all these different things that I need to be doing. But as you can see, these last 2 semesters, I've gotten all B's and A's, and I'm shifting my mindset and making sure that I'm committing to, learning how to build better study habits, etc. If they don't let you write an addendum, then you can still write about your GPA. And I would write it I would write it kind of towards the middle. So, that you write about, your intro. It has to be something that grabs your attention. Write the meat, what's going on? What have you been doing? Why do you want to do this research program? Are there people you want to work with? And then also talk about, okay, so, and I've also struggled a little bit, but, I've built resilience. I've, done all these different things that will allow me to be good in this program. And I've been doing this by building, again, better habits, better study habits. I've been forming team groups. I'm team leader in my study group. And now you can see that now I have B's and A's, et cetera. So you want to make sure that you do address those, because when they look at your application, they look at every single part of your application. They look at your GPA, they look at your personal statement, they look at your letters of rec, and et cetera. So if you have research experience, define them. If you don't have research, it's okay. You can talk about anything else. And that's why I'm saying informal interviews about learning what research is can help you craft that area. Saying, I don't have research experience, but I have these other qualities that can help me obtain data, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all these things that, scientists do. And if you do have research experience, be general. Remember, not everyone reading your personal statement will know your research area. Not everyone reading your personal statement is a scientist. So keep that in mind. You want to be as clear as possible without giving too many scientific jargon. What does this mean? By saying, I use, EA.HY926 cells to no. I use blood cell type cell that I can use for my research, et cetera. So make sure that you use words that are not too outside of the comfort zone for other people. And skill set and techniques, those are things that you need to add, because that talks about your value as a scientist or a value as a student if you're going to get a scholarship. You also need to talk about what you bring to the table and what you want to work with and who you want to work with. So what are you going to accomplish while you're in the program? They give you, but you also need to give something in return. So this is what I was telling you about. So yes, they're going to give you a position, but what are you going to bring? You're going to bring your dedication. You're going to bring your teamwork, so that you can continue doing awesome research with all the other research scientists in the lab. Who do you want to work with? Show them that you care about their program. So I already told you this too before. So you don't want to write a general statement to all these summer internship programs and say, I want to work for this research program, and these, this is why I want to do it. You also want to tell them, I want to be part of this research program that does cutting edge research and is known for agricultural science. And I would want to work with Professor A and Professor B and Professor C, because they all have research interests or values that align with mine. In terms of scholarship too, what's going to make you a good scholar? And are you going to, and one of the things that I say for scholarships is they want to know your commitment to the community. So what is your commitment to the community, how you're going to be helping, et cetera. So think about all those things when you're crafting those statements. And sometimes those paragraphs can be 1 paragraph long, 2 to 3 sentences talking about why you're interested in their program, who you want to work with, or your scholastic achievement, as well as what you're contributing to the community. The juice to writing a personal statement: before you begin, be organized, develop a theme or thesis to unite your essay. It is the main point you want to communicate. And for me, like I said before, for me has always been using resilience. I come from a very poor background in El Paso, Texas. And I talk about how we've overcome all these different challenges, and how, although I didn't have any role models, the governor of Texas was my role model. And I found ways to excel. And so those are the things that I talk about in my personal statements as an undergraduate. Before you begin your writing process, choose what you want to discuss. So I've already told you, make an outline. It's really easy to make an outline of things that you want to write, and then that makes the process of writing easier. Give yourself enough time by sticking to a deadline. Be strict. You have to have a first draft. Your first draft is going to be one of the most horrible drafts you've probably ever written, and that is okay. So your draft, and make sure that you try to be as try to take care of all the grammar issues, etc., before sending it out. But that's why you want to send it to people that you're comfortable with. The first draft is going to be probably student peers, your friends, maybe your mom or your dad, if they're willing to help you with it, if they, but think about also things too. Like my parents never were able to help me because they were Spanish speakers. So I would have to get other mentors who could help me write that and peer review it for the first time, right? And so think about all these application deadlines. So you need to have your first draft at this time. And then you need to make sure that you can send it for peer review. You're probably going to get it again. And then you're going to need to send it to peer review again. And you're going to get it again until you have a version of that personal statement that you think you can submit. So the do's in writing a personal statement, the actual writing. This is an essay about your journey or as an emerging scholar, not an autobiography. What do I mean by this? So state your interests and your goals and provide evidence to confirm these interests. Explain how earning the specific degree or scholarship or experience will help you achieve your goals. Use concrete examples to distinguish yourself from other applicants. Start your essay with an attention-grabbing lead. This is always hard, and I always say this. If you don't really know exactly how you're going to start it, don't, get all worked up about it. Write the meat of your personal statement, and then you can always come back. But an anecdote, a quote, a question, or engaging description of a scene is always something that can help. And make sure that you keep in mind when applying to different things, you're going to want to that attention grabbing lead is going to be different for each. For example, for a scholarship versus a research experience versus graduate school versus medical school. So think about all those things as well. However, if you don't know where to start, just get started. Refer to your outline and begin filling in the details. You can tweak the intro later, like I said. Write clearly and succinctly. Use a professional and active voice. And remember, if you have 2 pages, you don't have to use all the 2 pages, but please try to write more than, 2 or 3 paragraphs. 2 or 3 paragraphs doesn't tell me a lot about yourself. Make sure that you have enough, maybe make it a page long if you don't have a lot to write about. Don't lie about yourself, but make sure that you can talk about yourself in a very positive way that you can fill in the blanks. The editing, please revise your essay at least 3 times. That's the minimum. I would have the revision process be an iteration. And if you ask my students, we go through their personal statements maybe at least 3 to 4 times until we think, they're better. And it begins with thinking about it generally. So is the organization good? Do you need to switch some things around? I need more information about this. I need more information about that. And then towards your second or your third one, you're going to be looking more about sentence structure. Does this actually fit in here? And then kind of the last versions, grammar. It's really important because having grammar issues can lead for people to think about you differently. So in addition to your editing, ask someone else to critique the first and the second drafts, which I already told you. Someone with this experience and can help you mold it. The first drafts you can always send to your student peers. That's not a big deal. But once you're hitting, your second, your third, your fourth, and you're kind of thinking you're getting ready to submit, I would have that personal statement be edited by someone in the field, by someone who knows the field, someone who can give you a little bit more feedback in terms of, what else needs to be in there or what else are you missing. And like I said, choose the people widely. You can choose any mentors to do this. And remember, it can be personal. But again, if you think it's too personal and not appropriate, always ask people before you write about this. Ask another person to read your final draft to look for grammar, spelling errors before you submit it. It's important. Grammar issues can, be off-putting for some people. So make sure that it can be as clean and as well-written as possible. The don'ts to writing a personal statement. Don't include information that doesn't support your thesis. So if you're going to be sticking to, one theme, make sure that you talk about 2 or 3 things in depth, but don't talk about everything. So for example, for me, it would be, I'll talk about my research experiences, and then I'll talk about my work in the community. And that will probably most likely fill 2 pages, or if not more. But I keep to those two things because I've already had so many research experiences and I've had a lot of work in the community that I can talk about. Don't start with your essay. I was born, or my parents come from. These are all very generic, and you can use them. I'm not saying that you can't, but maybe start with something more attention grabbing. Don't write an autobiography or itinerary or resume. So if you have a resume, you're going to submit that. This is actually explaining the resume. So there are a lot of things that are not explained in your resume, and you're going to use those specific examples to bolster the strength of your personal statement. Don't provide a collection of generic statements and platitudes. So, there are a lot of statements that are very cliche, or there are a lot of statements that are a lot of people use for a lot of different things. So make sure that you stay away from those, and your personal statement should be as unique as you are. Don't rehash, I already told you this, don't rehash your resume or other parts of your application in your essay. Don't gloss over any potential red flags. So this is talking about those red flags, such as, for example, a low GPA. So you don't want to gloss over them, and you don't want to lie about them, and you don't want to say anything inappropriate about them or negative. So what you want to do is if you can't write that addendum that I told you about, then you would want to have to explain that in your resume, in your personal statement, and try to talk about it in the most positive, light. Don't give mealy-mouthed, weak excuses for your GPA or test scores. And this is one of the things that, you really need to think about. So if you haven't been doing well in school, why has it been? And what are the steps that you've been taking to do better? And right now, I can probably see that, maybe COVID has made it really hard, and maybe the past semester or two, you haven't been doing really well. So you want to talk about how COVID has affected your life, for example. That's one of the things that I would talk about. So if you had, deaths in the family, et cetera, because of this, COVID is a big deal. And so you want to think about why you want to talk about it, why it's going to be in there, and how it's going to explain deficiency or lack of something within your personal statement. Don't make things up. So I already told you, don't make things up and don't lie. And kind of this is the workflow of a personal statement. Write an outline to address the writing prompt or questions, and write. Forget about the limit, just write. And proofread, reorganize, make it more succinct to meet the criteria. Look at examples of successful candidates. I actually have several personal statements that I can share with you. And if you want them, please email me and I will send them to you. But don't look at these examples until you've actually written something, because you don't want to copy what others have been writing. You want to do your own thing and then use those to kind of guide you in terms of how you should craft this personal statement. Send to friends or advisors to proofread, 1 to 2 people in the beginning, and then it's going to be, they're going to send their edits back and you're going to work on their edits. Sometimes you're going to get a lot of red marks on your document. And sometimes that's great, because that means that they're, don't take it in a bad way. Oh, they did not like my personal statement. No, this person took the time. There's a lot of red marks. There's a lot of suggestions, a lot of recommendations, because they want it to be better. And so think about those things. Think about also if somebody sent you a personal statement with, a few red corrections, and you're like, oh, awesome, this is really great, because they thought it was great. But at the end of the day, it may not be as great as it is, and they didn't take the time to look at it. So think about how you react to criticism from others. Don't get angry at people if they have suggestions or want to help you make your personal statement better. And also, you don't have to use all the corrections or suggestions someone makes to you. Those are suggestions and you can use them to make it better. But if you don't agree with them, you can stick to what you were doing. Also, again, so this is an iteration, work on the edits, and to friends and advisors to proofread. It could be the same or it can be different people, and work on this iteration until you think your statement sounds the best possible. Check for grammar mistakes. And once you're ready, once it's completely ready, that you're like, okay, I think I have everything that it needs to be. I've already sent it, out 5 times to get revised. I think it's where it's at. Send it out with your application and don't look at it, because if you continue to go back and look at it, you're always going to find something that was wrong with it. And that's going to be the worst thing that you can continue to do. And so here are additional websites that can help you with the process of writing. If you're stuck, if you're going to apply to somewhere and you just need some direction, you can stay on and we can help you kind of brainstorm. But you can write all these different links. If you have a personal statement with you already, we can talk a little bit, you can send it to me and we can talk about it more. Or I can go ahead and ask any questions that I did not clarify. And I see there's some in the chat.
So when we're done with our personal statement, can we email that to you and have you look over at it? And
Yes.
and if anything, can we also maybe set up a meeting as well?
Definitely. So you can go ahead and email me with your personal statement. We can set up a Zoom meeting, and maybe give me like, a couple days to look at it, and we can discuss it. And, if you want, another good skill set to have is you have already met other scientists here that have already been through this process. So if anybody interests you and if you want to reach out to them and they provide their email, you can. So that's another option that you can do. I can go ahead and look at them, or you can have any of the other scientists on here to look at your personal statement as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Hi, Olivia. So I'm going back to the chat, and there was a question. Do letter recommendations have to only from academia, or can be from anywhere else?
They don't have to be from academia, but that's why I was saying, like, think about where you're applying and think about who knows you the best and think about what their position is as well. So for example, if it's a research position, you want to make sure that people can talk about your strengths and what you can be doing as a researcher, right? So you want to make sure that you think about where you're applying and how specifically that person can help you. So in many cases, faculty or professors can talk about your research or research intentions or et cetera. But the way that they can do this is, if you tell them, oh, can you write me a letter of rec? And all they know about you is your letter grade, all they're going to be able to talk about is your letter. So if that's the case, I would actually ask someone else who's not in academia. If you don't know any professors who can actually write you a robust and strong letter, I would ask somebody who you volunteered with. I would ask different people. I would not ask friends. I would not ask your family members. I would ask someone that you've actually worked with in some capacity.
Okay, thank you. We also have a question from Joseph. I'm not sure if Joseph, you want to come up and talk about the question that you bring up to UCSD transfer students, if you're still here.
So he says it was referring to the specific program. For the SURF program, Joseph?
Yeah, I think I asked that question before it was answered, and I think there was the website, and I saw that it said you have to be enrolled in San Diego City College, I believe. Yeah, I have that answered.
So I didn't talk about this because this is, I guess I was thinking it was going to be a lot more City College people, but there's also a different, with the same, you would be training with the same students, but this would actually be a SURF pharmacology. And so this is open to, and maybe Metz can talk a little bit more about this. That's the one that she did. So she did the SURF pharmacology SURF program, which is basically you train with the same Iraq-to-SURF students, but those allow for a different pool of students. And the reason why is because Iraq-to partners with colleges here in the San Diego area. So that's our partner institution. And we want to make sure that we have enough City College applicants that we take, as well as other people from the United States.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have, could you put the link of the website in the chat for me to read up later?
And here's something that you should all keep in mind. So right now you're meeting me for the first time. I'm telling you about how to write a personal statement. I'm telling you that I'm offering you my services, that I'm telling you that I care about you and I want you to get to where you need to go. So with that in mind, if you have applications that are due the next fall, make sure that you remind me and that you continue to get to know me through email, or you can set up a conversation with me in the future. We can talk about, it doesn't have to be necessarily for me to redo your material, but you can talk to me about, okay, so I want to do this, here's what I've been doing. What do you think? Or can I be doing anything else? Do you have any other tips and pointers? And that way I can continue to get to know you. And therefore, eventually, maybe this could lead to me writing you a letter of rec. So think about how you can leverage the people that you're meeting now. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be anybody in this group. It can be anybody else, but keep us in mind, continues to email us, continue to get to know us so that you can continue to build your social capital or your network of people that will help you eventually when you need them. All right, well, with that said, thank you to City College, thank you to City SACNAS, thank you to SUBIR. I really wanted to thank my partner in crime, Beto Vasquez, for always including me and making sure that I can be of service and can help with anything that you may need. So if you need anything, please reach out to me, reach out to any of us that were here. We're all more than happy to provide any resources that can help you get to your next stage in your career.